guys, welcome back to Make Away Life Coaching. My name is Sarah Abbott and I'm the life coach here. So today we're continuing with the amazing book, How We Love, and we've gone through the love styles so we understand. Hopefully you took the test is free online. There's no reason not to take it. And maybe you're beginning to sense which love style you are, or maybe you got the book and you already know which love style you are. Well, today we're digging deeper into the patterns that emerge and the dances that occur when certain love styles get together with certain other love styles. So today we're going to talk about the Pleaser-Vacillator combo, and I hope that you enjoy it. If you're a pleaser or vacillator, married to the other one, it's just really, really transformational information. So why don't we begin? I want to read you a quote from the How We Love book about the core pattern of the pleaser-vacillator. When they meet, vacillators romantically idealize the giving, attentive nature of a pleaser and readily believe they have found their soulmate. Oh gosh. If you even use the word soulmate, you're probably a vacillator. Big clue. Internally, pleasers are quite delighted, thinking they have made their partner happy. Over time, however, the vacillator's unrealistic expectations are somehow shattered by disappointment. Disillusioned, the vacillator gradually becomes angry and demanding. Of course, if you have a lot of anger, you're probably a vacillator. Pleasers react with fear that causes them to try harder and harder to make their spouse happy. They try to please by doing things around the house, fixing or repairing things, surprising with gifts, or lavishing indulgences upon their angry partner. With so much focus on the other person, they lose a part of themselves in the process. After years of living out this pattern, the pleaser is walking on eggshells and resents it. Reminder, if you have a lot of resentment, you're probably a pleaser. The vacillator remains chronically unhappy, sensing that the connection is based on fear and duty, not passion. That's so vacillator. I'll get into that later. Although this pattern is similar to the vacillator and avoider dance that we talked about last week, here the pleaser tries harder and harder and harder, whereas an avoider would retreat. And then that whole cycle continues. So let's jump into the material. Okay, so let's break down this pairing, okay? Vacillators are usually not raised with a parent who is very nice. There's not a lot of niceness usually in the vacillator home. So when they meet the pleaser, they're like, oh my gosh, this is the nicest person I've ever met. Or sometimes the vacillator is actually distrustful of how nice the person is because nice is not something they grew up with. So anyway, it kind of depends. Obviously, you probably wouldn't end up married to the pleaser if you didn't trust them. So let's assume that if you married the pleaser, you were like totally enamored with how nice they were. And the vacillator eats up the attention and the doting that the pleaser is giving them, and they're like, oh, this is so great, I'm finally getting the attention I deserve, after a whole childhood of not getting enough of what they needed. And the pleaser feels super successful at first, like, oh my gosh, I'm so good at taking care of this person and meeting his needs or her needs. And that continues for a while, successfully in the beginning. Okay, so the pleaser who grew up with anxiety because they just needed to feel successful pleasing people, but maybe they didn't get that in their family of origin, they didn't feel successful at that. They have their anxiety reduces when they're around the vacillator because they are successful pleasing the vacillator. And so everyone's doing really well for a while, but then the wheels fall off the cart. So ultimately in the relationship, what happens at some point is that the vacillator starts kind of thinking like, you know what? This isn't actually a very intense connection for me because really the pleaser is just placating me. My therapist told me one time that she had a client who told her that being married to a pleaser can be like being married to a ghost because you don't really know what their interests are. They let you pick the movie that you're renting. You ask them what they want for dinner. They're like, whatever you want, honey. And so there's not a lot of there sometimes for the vacillator to connect to. And so the vacillator starts to feel like, wait a minute, you're not connecting me, you're just placating me, you're just getting me out of the way, which triggers the abandonment. Like, why don't you want to connect with me? This leads to anger and disappointment in the vacillator because that's what the vacillator always goes to, is anger. And now the pleaser, her anxiety's back, right? Because she wants to please, but the vacillator's not accepting it anymore. The same things that used to work don't work. So what does the pleaser do? I bet you can tell. They're going to try harder. So the pleaser's going to try harder, work harder, abandon their own interests more, and just like live their whole life to try to make this person happy. And unfortunately, they're not doing it in a way that the vacillator wants. They're not doing it through genuine connection, being known, and desiring to be in intense connection with the vacillator. They're doing it through a lot of acts of service and, abandoning themselves. And so the vacillator gets angrier and the pleaser tries harder, and repeat. This is the cycle, the dance that they get into. So one of the major problems here is with, at least on the pleaser side, is that pleasers aren't very good at receiving. And to have a genuine connection, like if you think about it, here's the pleaser and here's the vacillator. A genuine connection could be like a string that they're both holding, and the connection's going to go back and forth. But if you don't know how to receive connection, or receive attention, or receive love, then the connection's only going one way. And believe it or not, you think maybe that would be great for anyone to be like, the vacillator might be like, I'm getting a lot of love. What else do I need? Wrong. The vacillator's so attuned to connection that they want it going both ways. And the vacillator doesn't understand that the pleaser didn't receive love this way growing up, and they don't know how to do it yet. And so that is where part of the breakdown is occurring. So after this dance between the two continues for long enough, the pleaser starts to get resentful. Remember, if you have a lot of resentment, you're probably a pleaser. That's one of the big clues for that one, that love style. So they are getting resentful because they're killing themselves for their partner, and it's not good enough. And so their resentment is building over the months or years, and they're killing themselves. They've totally abandoned their own desires and needs in order to please this person, and it's not working, and the person doesn't appreciate it. So resentment building, and what ultimately happens at the end of the marriage is that the pleaser runs out of energy, and they're done pleasing. They just don't have the energy for it anymore. And actually, this is a really big predictor of a divorce in this couple, because once the pleaser is out of energy, it's done. And they have so much resentment that it's really hard to come back from. And that often ends in divorce, or just, the end of the connection in the marriage. So the good news is, just like every other marriage, there's hope for if you're in this vacillator-pleaser combo. Maybe you're the pleaser and you're starting to run out of energy, or you can see that for yourself in the future. Or if you're the vacillator and you're married to a pleaser and you're frustrated because they're not, reciprocating connection with you, and you realize, I think my spouse is actually killing herself or himself to try to please me, and you want to, get ahead of this before the resentment is an overwhelming tsunami in your marriage, there is hope. Get the book. Read the book. You don't need to read every single chapter. Read the pleaser chapter and the vacillator chapter, and then read the chapter on Pleaser-Vacillator Marriage. That is going to transform your life. And then, as they recommend in the book, you might want to get their workbook, which has very specific tools in this section for the pleaser-vacillator combo. I don't know what more you can want. It's direct guidebook to what the work you need to do. It's very powerful work, and it will transform your marriage. And then last, I just really would encourage you to pray for your marriage, because like I said in last week, these emotional woundings and the stuff we come out of childhood with is really deep work. And from my experience with you guys, if anyone has tried to heal themselves by doing the work, it is me. Not only did I go to therapy for many eons, I went to couples therapy, then I got a third therapist, then I went to therapy school because I was like, I want to know how this whole thing works. Therapy school was 3 years of me doing a deep dive on all of this, honestly, for myself. I wanted to help others, but I also spent a lot of time therapizing myself during that whole time. And what I found is that we cannot truly heal ourselves or our marriage on our own. I really believe that you have to pray for your marriage and pray that God will help you with some of these hard things. And I know he will, because he did it for me and he's done it for other people. So come back and join us next week when we're going to talk about the avoider-pleaser marriage. That'll be really fun. Okay, see you next Thursday. Have a good week. Bye-bye.